Welcome to the Pat White Show. One of the biggest things that just happened in the Trump administration was Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, as you know, is the head of the Department of Information, DNI, and Director of National Intelligence. Big thing. She knows all the secrets. She knows everything. She knows what is, what isn't, what happened, what didn't happen. She's the keeper of the secrets. Well, she just declassified some documents that are about as important as anything I think I've ever heard in my particular life involving a president and what they were trying to do. And those documents just said that when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, the Democrat Party was so upset about it that Hillary didn't win that Barack Obama called a special gathering of the intel people, the big people, Clapper, Comey, all of those particular, Brennan, all of them. And because there was a presidential daily brief, every day the presidential gets a daily brief. And the intel people figured out there was no Russia, helping Trump. That was the whole line they were using. Remember, Russia was going to fix the election. Russia was going to do this. Russia was going to do all that. And the intel community said, ain't there. Well, that daily brief was not given to the president. It was trashed and replaced with something else because the administration didn't want that out. And then because the public sees those things, didn't want that out. So they got together, had a little meeting, a little secret meeting, confab. Notes of that meeting have now been released. And essentially what it says, they decided to keep it up, use the Russia thing, and use everything possible to try to get Donald Trump impeached, thrown out of office, in prison. You call it, they tried everything. Everything. And this came all the way from the top to Barack Obama. Now we're hearing all this stuff, and here's all the stuff that Tulsi Gabbard has released. It's paperwork. And the people she released it to said, well, what are you going to do with this stuff? You got all this stuff, now what are you going to do with it? Tulsi Gabbard said, well, we're turning it over to the Justice Department. Well, anytime you turn everything over to the Justice Department, you can't guarantee anything's going to happen because, well, they could just sit there and sit on it, not do anything with it. Well, Tulsi Gabbard said, Pam Bondi says we're going to get to the bottom of this stuff, and she may very well do that. Will she do it? Will the Attorney General go after a former sitting president, the former FBI head, former national security head, former head of the CIA? All of those head people, the Brennans, the Clappers, the Comeys, Obama, would she actually go after them and bring charges, grand jury stuff, charges against them? Well, if you did it in Washington, D.C., nothing would happen, folks. Let's be honest. Because everybody in Washington, D.C. they're Democrats, and they're about as party-oriented as you could. So nothing would happen. But because of the way it was done, it could be introduced in other jurisdictions outside of Washington, D.C. Or that evidence could be presented and a trial could happen not in D.C., somewhere outside of that. But will it? Ask yourself that. Will the Department of Justice actually go after a former sitting president, a former head of the CIA, former big-time people, former head of the FBI, and hit them all with treason? Because that's what this was. These were people trying to say, we don't like the fact the public voted for someone, and we're going to try to get them destroyed and taken out of office. He had 2 impeachments. We're going to try everything to do that because we don't want him in office, and we're angry that Hillary didn't get in. And created a massive amount of garbage that was put out there. And all the stuff they put out there, they knew it was wrong, but they fed the beast. And they kept feeding it, and they kept feeding it. Even during his entire first administration, that's what he was fighting off. Remember, they had to bring in the special investigator. And that took, years? And $40 million, your taxpayer money, my taxpayer money? $40 million. And you know what they found? Nothing. There was no there. They were trying to put him in. They were trying to put Trump in jail. That was it. That was their goal. Every lie they could come up with. Well, now all the paperwork's come out, and here it is. Tulsi Gabbard declassified it because she can, and now it's out there for people to see. Now, what's going to happen? Well, goes to the Department of Justice. Like I said, Pam Bondi. What is Pam Bondi going to do with this stuff? I don't know. Will she bring it up? Will she send it to a grand jury? Say, here's the stuff you want to indict? It's never happened in America, folks. Are we getting close to something that's never occurred that may in fact happen in your lifetime, in my lifetime? A president being charged with treason? Really? Well, that's where we stand. Now, remember George W. Bush administration, the nuclear war, nuclear weapons in Iran, or in Iraq, rather? Well, it didn't happen. Nothing happened to him. That nothing happened to him. Please understand that. So Washington covers this stuff over. I don't care what party you're in. They did it for George W. Bush. Are they going to cover it up for Barack Obama trying to take down Donald Trump? I don't know. But I can tell you this. The information's out there. You can believe it. You can disbelieve it. But the numbers are there. I just read a text that Donald Trump wrote saying, hey, this is going on. These people are just doing this to get me. And apparently, according to the paperwork that's been released, in their own words, that's exactly what they were trying to do. So America, what do we do now? This is a serious constitutional crisis. And where it's going to go is anybody's guess. But at least now you know something has happened. And this one could be really, really bad and upsetting to the American system as we know it. If you want to show an example of pure stupidity on the part of someone in a very high-ranking position, well, this is it. You haven't heard about it. It happened at a Coldplay concert in Boston. Now, one of the things Coldplay has is a thing called their Kiss Cam. And during one of the breaks or whatever in the show, the lead singer, who's a guy by the name of Chris Martin, they pan around with their Kiss Cam and they get a shot of people, and sort of like you see things on TV on the NBA games or the basketball games where they show the Kiss Cam in the stadium or the center, wherever it is being played. And some people ham it up and other people, well, not so much. Well, when they took the shot of this gentleman, Andy Byron is his name. He's the CEO of Astronomer. There he was standing in a suite in Boston, standing out there in front of the suite with this young lady, his hands wrapped around her in, well, a loving fashion, if you will. And suddenly the Kiss Cam comes up upon them. And they realize they're on TV. They see it on the big Jumbotron. And suddenly he ducks down out of the picture. She rapidly turns around and ultimately runs off the screen, if you will. Well, later on, a statement comes out from Andy Cohen. And what he says, or Andy Byron rather, what he says is, hey, it's Coldplay's fault for invading my privacy. Well, Mr. Byron, you go to an event like that, you're out in public, you can be seen anywhere, cameras are there in public. It's just the way the world works. Now, I should also point out it's on the ticket that you purchased with you and your squeeze that says, hey, cameras are there and you can be seen. That's no excuse. But I understand the statement now has been so-called that was issued by Mr. Byron is not legitimate. All right, I'll give you that. But what is legitimate, Mr. Byron is the CEO of Astronomer. He's been in some other companies before. They're a database company that, fixes stuff and takes care of support on data for the particular software that exists for companies. Well, the young lady who he's with, cuddling, her name happens to be Kristen Cabot. Kristen Cabot is an executive at the same company. That's Astronomer, where she is the head of HR. That's right. The head of HR, who's hired by the CEO, as a rule. Well, apparently she was hired for more than one reason. And in this case, there she is cuddling or canoodling, call her what you will, with the CEO. Now, you're saying, okay, big deal. Well, there is a big deal. You see, Mr. Andy Byron is married with children. His wife is a teacher, professor, whatever. She's a high ranking education person. And, well, Miss Cobalt also happens to be married herself. Yet these two are out there canoodling at the Coldplay concert and ends up on TV for everybody to see. Now, seen the pictures, you've seen the statement, which apparently is in error, but Mr. Byron has not issued any statement after that so-called fake statement was in fact put out. Now, Mrs. Byron, the wife, has taken her name down off of Facebook and whatever else. Her name is down. And I'm just guessing that the next story you're probably going to hear about is a legal team, divorce lawyers brought in to, dissolve the marriage. Maybe for two people and not necessarily one. So here's the first time in many, many years the group Coldplay has created some singles, some brand hit singles, namely between a married man and a married woman. And yes, they will be single very soon, is my guess. Whatever you do, you don't go to a concert with someone with whom you are not legally wed. Show up and put yourself on a kiss cam simply because you're there and everybody can see it. Not a smart move there, Mr. Byron. And Miss Kristen Cabot, sweetheart, you done the wrong thing as an HR person. And my guess is your credentials as being an HR individual may be, stripped, if for lack of a better term. Now you know what's going on in Boston. Coldplay makes it another hit. Well, multiple singles, if you want to call it. Well, I'm not one who lives in New York City. I just live in the Midwest, flyover country, as they call it. And the only one I know who lives in New York City is my former newswoman when I worked at WOWO back around 2005. And now she's a famous broadcaster on Fox. And I'm sure she's doing okay and not going to worry about this story. But in New York City, they've got a mayor's race going on. Now, New York City, admittedly, is the biggest city in the United States, most important financially. And whoever's running New York, well, they've got a lot of power and control. Turns out that New York had their primary election, which is what they normally do. And about 700,000 people out of 11 million showed up to vote in the primary. Who did they choose? Well, they had some people who were running. They had the current mayor, who's sort of under indictment, but not under indictment, Eric Adams. And then, of course, there's the former governor, Andrew Cuomo. You might remember him. He got tossed out, too, kind of messing around. You know what it is. Well, anyway, they were running for the mayor's office, and so was Curtis Silva. You might remember him with the Guardian Angels back in the 1970s, and a former prosecutor by the name of Jim Walton. All these guys were running for the mayor's office, along with this Zohan Mandani, who, well, he's a socialist. Socialist is a nice word for communist, but still a socialist. Well, anyway, the primary ended, and guess who won? Zohan Mandani. Why? Because he promised the people of New York everything for free. Free this, free that, housing, government grocery stores, getting rid of the police, open the prisons. I mean, promise them everything, but give them our pej. Old line. Well, anyway, turns out that Mr. Mandani, who's a very rich kid, spending his parents' money, 34 years of age, so he's young. He says, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to get rid of people owning houses. I'm going to have communes. That's communist stuff, folks. Well, anyway, we're going into the fall election. Now, the problem is this. You got all these people running, and then basically in the fall, we're going to see what happens. Well, it turns out that Mr. Cuomo, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, says, I'm going to run as an independent. I'm going to run. And then, of course, you have Silva. He's still running as a Republican. Not he's going to get a chance because Well, New York City is very Democrat. And then you got the Mr. Walden, the former prosecutor. So you got all these people running, and the truth of the matter is there's going to be a split vote. That's my guess. You're going to have some voting for this person, some voting for that person, and a lot of those liberals out there that are looking for a free handout, free stuff, because they've been promised free stuff, they're going to vote for Zoran Mandani. Yes, the socialist communist who's running for mayor. Now, will that help New York or hurt New York? Well, it's hard to say because New York hasn't done itself a whole lot of favors in a long time. They haven't had a really good mayor. Michael Bloomberg, I thought, was okay. Rudy Giuliani cleaned up the city. But now New York's bad place, bad place. Now, if Mr. Mandani gets in, he's going to tax all the rich people. And let's wait and see how many people decide to call U-Haul and move out. Probably a lot. The whole thing reminds me, as I sit here and watch, there was a great movie years ago called Escape from New York. You might remember it. Escape from New York was sort of a science fiction kind of thing, but I'm beginning to think that maybe the science fiction of the past may be very much approaching the future of New York City, Escape from New York. Regardless, it appears to me that Mr. Zoran Mandani is probably going to be the next mayor of the city of New York. And imagine that. A socialist / communist running New York. What can he do? Heaven knows what he can do. But I can tell you what he can't do is pull New York City out of the mess it's gotten itself into. Oh, and with no police department and social workers running the city? Yeah, I'm guessing Escape from New York movie is going to become real life. And it's going to happen in America's Big Apple. Let's just wait and see. House Republicans are continuing their hearings to find out whether Joe Biden was, well, mentally equipped to be able to run the office of the presidency, especially when it came to writing those hundreds of pardons that he utilized. Now, James Comey, Republican Kentucky, has been conducting hearings. And you probably heard about these. The first two folks they had to come in, one was the doctor, the physician responsible for the health of the president, Kevin O'Connor. Kevin O'Connor sat down in front of staff. They asked him questions. Kevin O'Connor said, I'm taking the fifth. Anything they asked, I'm taking the fifth. Now, he's a doctor. They didn't ask him any health questions. That's a violation of, patient-doctor, concept, which, by the way, can be broken by the courts. But they said, hey, did anybody tell you to lie? Taking the fifth. So he took the fifth. And then they called in Anthony Bernal. He is the chief of staff to Jill Biden. And by all accounts, he's probably the most disliked person in the White House, according to the stories that I've read. He is pretty much, he's pretty much tough. That's what he is. He also took the fifth. Is that everything? Nope, ain't taking the fifth, ain't saying nothing. All right, so you've got two people they've called, two people have taken the fifth. Now, who they got scheduled to come in? Well, that's interesting. You should bring that up. Because coming up in August, Special Assistant to the President, Ian Sams, he's going to be called on August 21st. Let's see what he says. And then on September the 5th, they're going to have Andrew Bates, Deputy Presidential Press Secretary. Now, he works under none other than Karine Jean-Pierre. Works under her. He's deputy. So what's he going to say? And then finally, on the in the 5th of, I take that back. Let's see. She's going to appear the 12th of September. Karine Jean-Pierre appears 12th of September. All of these people are going to be asked questions. And if they all start taking the 5th, that's going to tell you something is going on and something they didn't want reported or something they don't want divulged. And I guarantee you that keeps going that way. People are going to start saying, What was going on in the White House? What was happening? Who was issuing the pardons? That's the question they're asking. Because if the pardons aren't legit, because they weren't approved and signed by Joe Biden himself, then they're not valid. And a lot of people are opening to be charged if those things are not valid. We're in new territory here, folks. This has never been done. Calling in these people to see if they're going to testify, and if they all clam up, they may even bring in Jill Biden herself. Won't that be interesting? That's risky. Not sure if they're going to do it. I'm just telling you what's going on. Taking the fifth, you have every right to do that in the Constitution. Fifth Amendment, it's there. But Kevin O'Connor, when asked, hey, anybody ask you to lie about the president? I'm taking the fifth. Won't answer any question. Anthony Bernal, yeah, you kind of figured. He's kind of a hard egg. He's hard. Taskmaster, call him what you will. He took the fifth. But if everybody else comes in, all this chief of staffs, special assistants to the president, deputy press secretary, and ultimately the press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre herself, if they all take the fifth, that's going to create a real big firestorm in Washington, D.C. What are they hiding? And what do they know? This all takes you back to 1974, when they had the Watergate hearings in Congress, and those were on national television. And the line is, what did they know, and when did they know it? Is this hearkening back to the Watergate of 1974? Maybe. This all happens to deal with pardons and the auto pen. And did Biden really know what was going on, or was it done by other people? If it was done by other people, it's not legitimate. And those people with the pardons could very well be charged with a crime. That's what's going on, folks. Now you know the hearings continue, but coming up real soon, Karine Jean-Pierre. Let's see what she has to say in front of a congressional committee. Watch, friends. Get your popcorn out. It's going to be very, very interesting. In an event that was unheralded and something I have personally never seen in my life, and heck, I'm old, the United States Senate, by a vote of 51 to 48, decided to, pull back money that Congress had already appropriated. They call it a rescission bill. And they voted to say, hey, money that was being authorized and was going to be spent by Congress, we've decided you're not going to spend it. Dealt with a couple of different areas. One, U.S. aid. Now, U.S. aid has pretty much been disbanded, but some of the stuff in the U.S. aid bill was woke stuff. And some of that woke stuff, you ain't going to believe it if you saw it. They cut that off. But a bigger thing they cut out, and this is a big one, was the 2-year extension of money to PBS and NPR. Now, PBS is public broadcasting, NPR is a public national public radio. Now, whether we need those or not, you can argue that, but I can tell you this. PBS came along back in the 1960s. Back in those days, we only had 3 channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And they were looking for something else where they could bring in and give people a different perspective on things because, the regular stations really didn't do anything political or what have you about anything. So you got PBS coming along. And you had Washington Street Week, and you had Gore Vidal, and you had a whole bunch of folks around there, both left and right. They had them on both sides talking about things. And fine, that worked out pretty well. But that was 1960s, 70s. It changed, folks. It went really to the left. You take a look at what NPR and what the PBS in particular are saying about the left versus the right. They're hammering the right pretty bad and hammering the left pretty tiny. Now, NPR, National Public Radio. I'm not really sure why National Public Radio started because we have more radio stations than you could ever possibly imagine. But NPR, I did a story about that some months ago about a former senior editor at NPR. His name was Yuri Berlinger. And like I said, he was a liberal, far left, and he actually quit NPR saying, hey, we've gone so far left, we have no other place to go. Everything went left. I mean, completely. And if you listen to NPR, you pretty well figure that one out. So what happened was the Congress or the Senate voted to say, we're taking away the money. And as far as that being working out for the stations, of course, the PBS stations are going, oh, we're going to have to quit this. We're going to have to stop that. We're going to have to not have the weather on there. We're not going to, Americans, according to PBS, are going to die. Problem is, there's so many areas that you could get information on right now that have nothing to do with PBS. You know, they take television ratings twice a year in this market, and they figure out, what are you watching? What are you watching? And they give people diaries, or they put things on their TVs and monitor what they're doing on their TVs. They're watching what you're watching. And to find out who's watching what, well, as far as showing up in the ratings, PBS really doesn't. Very few people actually watch PBS. Not that there's anything wrong, but they have gone, kind of pretty well off the left side of the equation, folks. And that's what's happened. Now, PBS used to have some good things on it. Remember, they used to bring in the British broadcasting system, Downton Abbey and a bunch of those things. And some of the stuff was pretty good. This Old House, I used to enjoy. Some of those things were pretty good. But politically, they didn't stay neutral. Politically, they went, off the left side of the earth. And that's what happened. And NPR really went off the left side of the earth. So now they're saying we're taking the money away. Well, here's the point. If these stations, PBS, NPR, they want to survive, let them go out there and use their salespeople to go out there and get people who believe in them, love them. Let them buy the advertising that keeps those stations afloat. PBS already has advertisers they're not really advertisers, but they are advertisers. Let's be honest. They can't run sale things, what they call media things, like, come on and buy it right now. We got a sale going on. You can't do that. But they're saying, well, if you need this sometime, think of us. So there's already commercials on PBS. Let them do their own commercials. Let them go out and sell their own product. Let them compete like the other radio and TV stations have to do within the market. Now, the Senate has approved this by a vote of 51 to 48, a rescission bill, pulling back funding that was already approved. And the two biggest things, USA, they said, nope, that's done. And the funding for PBS and NPR, that has now been eliminated. Will it ever come back for those venues? Who knows? Maybe if the left gets back into power, it might. But right now, nope, it's not. What will happen to PBS and NPR? Time will tell. And if they want to adjust and they want to make the changes in their world, they will do it. If they don't, well, it's on them. Just telling you what happened in the Senate. So now PBS and NPR are go your own way. Make your own way. And if you really believe in your product, you'll find people who are willing to sponsor it. That's just the way it is in the world, and that's the way it is in the real media. And now they're going to have to live exactly the way everybody else lives. Well, believe it or not, we are less than 45 days from the start of the NCAA football season. That's right. So let's chat a little bit of football and see what's going on and see, where the big money's going to be in football this year. Now, you probably heard that the courts have decreed that college students, whether they're football, basketball, baseball, gymnastics, whatever, the schools can no longer continue to use their name and their likeness without that student getting paid. That's right. In college, you can now earn maybe more money than you could in the pros. And realizing how few members of college's teams actually end up in the pros, now the more money you can make in college, the more money you're going to have. And that's why a lot of teams and a lot of universities are figuring out, we want to get a player in, we got to pay a lot of money. Which brings me to this point. What schools are paying the most amount of money to get their teams this year? Well, it turns out the number one team in America spending the most money for athletes to come and play on their campus is the University of Texas at, number one. But surprisingly enough, and this one caught my attention, Number two, the number two team in America is spending the most amount of money, $28 million, to get kids to come to Lubbock, Texas, to play football out there in West Texas. Lubbock, Texas, by the way, Texas Tech, that's the university we're talking about. $28 million. Coach says, well, we got to pay a lot more money because nobody wants to come to Lubbock. Now, if you've been to Lubbock, you know why. So, Texas Tech is number two at $28 million. Texas, University of Texas, Big T, my alma mater, number one. Number three, believe it or not, is Ohio State University. Yes, the OSU Buckeyes, number three in the nation, paying the big money to get kids on their campus, Columbus. Then we go out to the West Coast at Oregon, number four, the Ducks. Back to Texas for number five. Well, we got a tie going on between Texas A&M and Miami. They are tied for number five, paying their kids. And number seven, West Coast, USC, tied with Michigan. So now we know the Big Ten's paying Michigan, USC, Ohio State. They're paying big money for their kids to come to their schools. But you notice there's one name that isn't showing up. Well, there's a couple of names that aren't showing up. All right, we're going to start with one name that's not showing up in the Hoosier State, Indiana University. That's right, IU. IU is not in that big money. Now, are they paying money to students? Probably yes. Everybody's paying money. I'm sure they are. But they had a good team last year. Are they going to have a good team this year? Only time will tell, folks. And you got about 45 days to find out. And then, of course, let's go to the top part of the state, northern Indiana, and there's Notre Dame. Notre Dame's name is not in any of those lists paying the players. And apparently it turns out that teams have offered Notre Dame players buku amounts of money to come to their team and not play for the Irish. And the kids are turning it down. Now, why on earth would a kid not take $3, $4, $5 million to go play at a different school? I can't tell you the reason. I don't know. Maybe it's the panache of playing at Notre Dame. Or maybe it's the fact Notre Dame is seen on TV, every week? Maybe Notre Dame gets a lot of kids drafted into the pros? Don't know. But now you're understanding that NIL, name, image, and likeness, the rules set up by the courts that said college kids have to be paid. And schools are having to pay to recruit kids. So, who's picking up the tab for that? Well, if you're sending your kid to any of these schools, you're probably paying for it in one way, shape, or form. Yes, there's boosters out there. There's supporters. There's big money people, alumni. They're paying. But that used to be under the table stuff. They were paid. Nobody knew about it, just hiding the money. Now it's out in the open with NIL. So normally these big-time under-the-table supporters can become above-the-table supporters. And the university's having to pay the money as well. So now you know who's paying the big money. Turns out the University of Texas is the number one payer, but number two is little old Texas Tech in Lubbock, Texas. $28 million for kids to play football. And nowhere do we see the names of Indiana University or Notre Dame. How much are they paying their students? We don't know. But all we care about is W's and L's. And we're hoping that IU, if you're an IU fan, gets a whole lot of W's. Not to exclude the folks over at Purdue, mind you. Good people, good folks over in West Lafayette. Let's see what they're doing with the money they've got. We don't know, and everything happens the end of August. Football season 2025 is about to start. And money talks, or will it? Let's wait and find out.